Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we are specifically going to talk about is it good to have multiple rule systems for what does it mean to have multiple rule systems for tabletop role-playing games, okay? And what does the tabletop role-playing game community, what does the Dungeons and Dragons community want, right? And and are the Dungeons and Dragons community and the tabletop role-playing community different? Are they even is there a tabletop role-playing game community? Sorry, I'm going to skip right to that question. I'm not sure there is. I think one of the problems we're having, one of the reasons why we just came out of the 2023 spring Dungeons and Dragons OGL 1.0, okay, leak Firestorm, and I keep saying that leak part because I'm telling you, I think we have to, as a commentator community, understand that leaks are not evidence. They are not, and that just a ton of decisions and insults and comments were traded on vapor. Like there was nothing there. Like leaks are not evidence. We've got to stop. We need to stop going down this road. And if you watch through this whole thing, I was very careful to say leak every time because saying OGL 1.1 is not correct. It was never released. Right? And then other people are coming and saying, "Oh well, WotC confirmed it." No, WotC put out a statement saying we understand you're upset. There was no point where they were like, "Oh hey, we took the time to validate this leak that 1,000 channels reported on." So saying that the leaks were verified by WotC is absurd, right? And I'm telling you, if we continue doing this, if we continue treating leaks as evidence, it is going to lead to a very bad place, in my humble opinion. So, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. I understand the community wants to talk about leaks, but stop. But there was a point where people stopped. They were like, "Oh, let's talk about the OGL 2.0," and I'm like, This is never even it was claimed that the OGL 1.1 had been sent to people. The 2.0 was never even sent to anyone. So there was just all this talk about opinions and not fact, as though they were fact, right? And I'm all for talking about opinions, but I really strive and take a lot of time and effort to say this is my opinion when it's not a fact, right? And I'm willing to hear people who are in the middle saying, "Hey, you're wrong about this," and then you will find literally 100 examples of me going, "Thank you for the correction," right? Because opinions and facts aren't the same thing, right? So sorry, I'm having a conversation with someone I ain't here. Let's keep going. All right, so here's the issue, right? What this entire 2023 spring Dungeons and Dragons OGL 1.1 leak, Firestorm, really just one thing it unearthed, right? There's so much coming out of this. It's a cornucopia, right? It's just spraying out. And that's the other thing is it clearly was better, right? A whole bunch of companies were like, let's stop being lazy. Let's stop lazily drifting down the river and let's actually put on our big girl pants and let's compete with Dungeons and Dragons directly. And that's really what's coming out of this. Okay, but let me get all the way there. There's this assumption, and this is what's been exposed by this whole Firestorm situation. There's an assumption that multiple ways to play tabletop role-playing games is good. And you hear that it aggravates me so much. Just people like, "Oh, let me spout this same thing you've heard 1,000 times," right? Yeah, you didn't accept it before, but when I say it the 101th time, you'll believe it. And this is why I don't try so desperately not to repeat myself on this channel, because repeated words aren't heard. Okay? I know I just repeated the words. My stuff is extemporaneous. I flow. Right? All right, let's go. Okay. The issue, right, is people are like, "Oh, it'll be great to have all these different rule systems." And the D&D community and the tabletop role-playing community, actually just the D&D community, I don't think the tabletop role-playing community has done enough to be distinct. They are simply the D&D community. And we have factions within the D&D community. That's the reality. There is no tabletop role-playing game community. There is only the D&D community with factions therein, right? And one of the things that really drives me a little frustrated, right, vexed, right, is the D&D community has a faction that hates Dungeons and Dragons and utterly desires it to be destroyed. That's not an exact. Okay, did I miss something? Did Nerd Immersion, who got a 100,000K sub button, then put up D&D Be Gone as a thumbnail? Right? Has he fully outed himself as a fundamental opponent of fundamentally D&D? Looks like that's what happened. Right? I'm struggling to get all the way to the point here. Let me get all the way to the point. Okay? All right. We drive cars, right? The gas is on the right and the pedals in the middle, and we have a steering wheel, right? And guess what? People aren't looking for another way to drive a car. That's the issue, right? Generally, at the 51% check level, I'm not talking about exceptions here, but that standardization is accepted, and this is where we land. This is where we land. People don't want 4 rule systems. They don't want 10 rule systems. They don't want 100. When they come to a new tabletop role-playing game, they want the same rules, right? And that means every company out there doesn't get to lazily float down the river on a tube. You got to make your own ship. And here's the brutal part. You have to beat Dungeons and Dragons. You have to make your rules. You have to make your entire role-playing game experience better than Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because the reality is, this is the part we haven't been talking about. Having 2 ways to do something. Do you hear a push for like, oh, hey, you could drive you could use your feet on your steering wheel, and then you could put your left hand on the brake. People don't want that, right? Like, and that's just it. They want a standardization on the rule system, which makes this OGL thing even more problematic. And now we look back and you're like, oh man, wouldn't it be great if the OGL had stayed in place? But I get why Hasbro wants to kill the OGL, wants to throttle the OGL now, right? And the reason why is it's the disrespect. It was like, and we did it. And you're like, Scott, we didn't show disrespect to Hasbro. We don't owe them anything. And I'm like, I'm just going to point you right over to George Lucas. We did this all over. We did this before, right? Where the community was like, George Lucas, you suck, and the prequel sucked, right? And watch this, right? Now that has a new owner, it'll be so much better, right? And they were wrong. We all know they were shockingly wrong, right? And everybody wishes that we were back where we were, and that's exactly where we are right now. The OGL 1.0 was a lazy haven. Was a haven for the lazy, right? And now we're going into this new world where we're going to have to actually do some work and get some real stuff done. That is going to be hard. It is going to be hard, right? And it may, and the reality is people think they don't owe corporations anything. If an institution guardians something for 20 years, you owe them. And we need to start thinking past money. Right? And we also need to stop taking these assumptions. Here's the assumption that was never right, that we know right now was not right. The assumption is we don't need multiple. People want one rule system, which means that these companies have got to defeat Dungeons and Dragons for the D&D community to get what it wants. And that is terrifying, right? All of this was very alarming, right? All that's my humble opinion. I'm ready to hear yours. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.